Okay, so
Hold on, let me pause it.
so my name is Andrea, and I did Plato on rhetoric and poetry. So the introduction, that was one part, and it's basically that poetry and rhetoric should be philosophically analyzed at all times. Everything should be analyzed. And they come up with this theme of there's an old quarrel between philosophy and poetry, which we'll get into later. And then the scope of the quarrel indicates that for Plato, what is at stake is a clash between comprehensive worldviews like ethics, metaphysics, theology, and poetry has a persuasive and harmful influence, and that premises about nature and divine are always basically mistaken, and that philosophers dislike rhetoric as it is commonly practiced, and then Bowman, the decline of public speech into mere and demagogy.
Pause it.
So, the first, thing he talks about is Ion. And Ion is a prize-winning professional reciter of poetry, and he recites Homer's poetry. He thinks of himself capable of yet more, that he can, he not only recites it, but he knows what he's talking about. Like, he knows the concept, he knows how to analyze it, you get me?
Pause.
Yeah. So, since Ion claims that, Socrates challenges that by using a give and take method, which is he gets what you said and then he'll throw something back at you. So that's what he does. And one of the things is that Ion is committed to several theses that are not compatible with one another.
In other words, he contradicts himself.
Yeah, he contradicts himself. And then this is one of the quotes in there that I don't know, I just liked it, so I just put it. It's, if you knowledgeably pick out a good speaker on a subject, you can also pick out the bad speaker on it, since precondition of doing the former is that you have knowledge of the relevant subject matter. But this seems to contradict Ion's assertion that he can explain only Homer and not other poets. It says that he said that Ion said that he could explain Homer, but if you can explain Homer, then you can explain why you can explain sorry, honestly.
Can you pause it real quick?
Yeah. Okay, so the overall message here was that poets do what they do not from knowledge but from the divine inspiration that they get from the gods. Yeah. Okay. That this creative madness is shared amongst all artists. This explains why Ion can only recite Homer beautifully. He was only inspired in that area from this divine inspiration. A poet is a transmitter of a divine spark generated by the god. So the god gives the spark to the poet, and then the poet passes it down to the rhapsode, which is the reciter, which is Ion, and then he gives it to the audience. But he really doesn't know what he's talking about.
Interesting point. Would Homer be a good reciter?
No, he'd just be a good writer.
Yeah, he'd probably just be a good writer. And maybe not necessarily a reciter, just like a reciter. We see this with playwrights and directors. Mm-hmm. Okay, why? Or producers. Producers make good music, but they're not good singers. Okay, go ahead.
As an audience, we get lost in the poetry, music, images, etc. We feel some type of emotion that makes us enter into it and forget ourselves and lives. And that's why poetry and rhetoric is dangerous, which I stated in the introduction. It does not leave you as you were. Your understanding of what elicits your grief or laughter is shaped by these experiences that you get from the images, poetry, and the music. And you start to repeat this over and over, and then you start to believe that you know something, like Ion, since he repeats it, and everybody gets all emotional about it. He thinks he knows something thanks to their contact with this divine attraction from the god, or the poet first and then the god. and then we go to the Republic. So we come up with the principle of specialization, which is each person must do what they are naturally suited for and must not get into anything besides that one thing better for the society. So this is like the new Homer. Like he thinks that he shouldn't. Oh, the old Plato.
Right. I'm helping you out.
I know. It's good. Okay, so yeah, like he mentioned before, like he gives up on humans analyzing everything and doing all this philosophical things. So he just thinks that everybody should do what the divine inspiration gives you. So what you're best suited for. And that best souls don't imitate anything or anyone besides what they're given. There's no way that people will enjoy learning about philosophy if they are not inspired by the divine force. So it's best if people just do their own thing. By thinking or saying the lines of poetry is portrayed to have real effects on one's disposition. Poets misinterpret the nature in the subjects in which they write. So it's basically straightforward. Participating in the imitation by taking on these characters imitated was viewed as corrupting in all but a few cases. So like if you when you start to hear them talk, basically they're kind of like corrupting you in a sense, because like it shapes the way like you're gonna think for other situations in your life, right? Kind of, sort of.
Right, and you have to keep in mind that characters in a story do not represent real human beings. Does that make sense?
They represent ideas. So.
Right, an archetype hero or something. So we want to idealize the characters or actors in a story too much, and sometimes we do this in our culture where we'll listen to an actor because we're familiar with their roles as intelligent people or heroes. And after a while, we'll listen to them rather than some boring professor or something like that. You understand? Okay. So and the dialogue and the actor in a movie are coming from someone's mind. They're not a true depiction of interactions. Okay. Real interactions. Can you pause it real quick?
Mm-hmm. So in the Republic X.
Continue.
The main deficiency of poets is their products maim the thought of those who hear them. Maim is like wound or injure, so like, like they're wounding us basically. Like they're shaping us to be something else, and it's dangerous for us. Like, yeah. And that this is a third generation of nature, or from a third king of truth. So like. Basically the circle, it's like God, the poets, and then the reciter, and then us. So they're like the third generation, so they really don't know what they're talking about.
Things get diluted.
Okay, I get it. And that poets are imitators of phantoms of virtue and of the other subjects of their making. So they're just imitating what the God inspired them to do. Audiences are easily deceived into thinking this imitation is the truth. So just like all of us when we watch TV and stuff, like, basically.
Can you pause it real quick?
Yeah. Okay, the danger of poetry, it induces a dreamlike, uncritical state in which we lose ourselves in the emotions in question. So when we watch a TV show, like, we just daze off into it and we feel some type of way about it, and that's how we're basically deceived into this dreamlike state. We think it's real. We think that it could happen, like High School Musical. I thought that was cool.
I've seen you guys break down and dance in the cafeteria. No? I mean, all of a sudden know each other's moves.
And then mimesis, which is the imitation, right? Mm-hmm. That it shapes our images and our fantasies, our consciousness or semi-consciousness, pictures and feelings, which lead to shape of our character, especially what we think irrational and non-irrational. That's why it's dangerous, because it changes our morals and what we should do and what we shouldn't do and stuff like that. Okay. I thought this was cool that poetry in Platonic Greek comes from the word to make, so it's making up. That's what I think, and then it's cool.
Make believe.
Yeah, make believe, basically. And in present time, poetry is basically the mass media who are the culprits. So, it says that graphic violence, degradation of women and of sex equal the Platonic worries about the ethical and social effects of art. That it basically all comes from this, right? From all the things we see. And that's why women are looked down to, or like gender. And
Or minorities never play a good role, right? If you're brown, you're bad.
True.
Or you diverse.
Or if you're ugly, you're bad.
And it's all effects of art. I don't know if you guys remember him talking about the music that the people hear. Yeah, and then that it makes them the way they are. They think,
Oh, yeah, like rappers and stuff like that, yeah.
Forgive me if Eminem's diss track.
Dude, that was the most garbage dish track.
Oh, what?
It was kind of garbage. So then we go to the Georgias. So I kind of didn't understand this one, kind of did. So basically it starts that freedom is a kind of power produced by the ability to persuade others to do one's bidding, which he just said right now. Yeah. Rhetoric is a producer of persuasion. Socrates argues that the speaker is not a true speaker and does not convey knowledge to his audience. He is more of a public speaker, and its goal is to gratify the audience, so to make you feel good, to get you to feel emotional about what they're saying, that they're not speaking truth. That's what we have to understand. There's two types of persuasion, one that instills beliefs and another that produces knowledge. So the one are both bad?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Okay. Persuasion of the ignorant by the ignorant with a view to producing pleasure in the audience and its pleasures of power for the speaker. So we're ignorant, the poet is ignorant, or like Ion, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Like Ion is ignorant because he thinks he knows something, but he doesn't know the truth.
Can we pause it real quick?
Yeah.
Pause it. So if you think about...
So one of the main points is that rhetoric is altogether useless. If you use it, you're miserable. So if you use it to, like, Ion, he's miserable is what he's saying because, yeah, he's not speaking truth. And you're giving non-truth to an audience, which is useless because it's not going to help advance, basically. Yeah. That the art of rhetoric is all about empowering those who are strong by nature to master the weak by nature. The capacity to do what one wants is fulfillment in the sense of realization of pleasure. Rhetoric is an end to that. So I actually like that.
So the point of the poet and the speaker is to feel the power from the audience. You understand what he means? So it's pleasure. You can you pause it real quick?
Yeah, I can.
You can be the leader. This philosophy is called Kierkegaard. He's the one that brings that up.
There is no noble form of rhetoric, and there's no examples are mentioned.
Right. It's all crap.
Mm-hmm. Art is a skill directed towards some form of good intended for the benefit of those practicing it or receiving it, which is real art. So if you're benefiting it, like you just said, okay. And that false art creates an incorrect impression of good by means less desirable. And that virtue is itself the good life, which result as with proper practice and various principles and behavioral methods. Okay, now we go to Phaedrus. Okay, so what happened?
Pause it.
Yeah.